Star Trek needs to give Voyager a comeback like Picard did for the Next Generation. It is Star Trek, Voyager's turn for a glorious comeback after the Next Generation's cast and the Enterprise D had their big nostalgic moment in 2023. Star Trek, Picard didn't start as a feel-good tribute to Jean-Luc Picard's heyday, but the spin-off certainly reached that point in Season 3. After finally reassembling the main cast of the Next Generation, the crew went into battle, slightly wearier than before, on a secretly restored Enterprise D. It was an unapologetic throwback designed to rekindle memories of a bygone era. By any measure, that goal was achieved. Star Trek, Voyager celebrates its 30th anniversary in 2025, and despite never hitting the same mainstream heights as the Next Generation, Voyager and its crew reserve a special place in fans' hearts. Modern Star Trek rarely turns down an opportunity to reference, or indeed repeat, the past, but such tributes have largely been restricted to the original series and the Next Generation thus far. While not immediately clear how or when it could happen, Star Trek, Voyager's cast needs its own The Last Generation moments sooner or later. 30 years later, Star Trek, Voyager's legacy is more impressive than ever. During its era, Star Trek, Voyager never quite lived up to its predecessors. Deep Space Nine had been deliberately engineered as an alternative Star Trek show, but Voyager was the linear successor to the original series and the Next Generation. After a bumpy couple of seasons, the Next Generation established itself as arguably the franchise's crowning achievement, but Voyager had no such luck, landing somewhere in the middle of most lists ranking Star Trek's best shows. Voyager's positive legacy is visible in how much joy recent character returns have brought. Having said that, Star Trek, Voyager is still being discussed and embraced 30 years down the line from its premiere, and not many TV shows can put that on their resume. Voyager's strengths may have been somewhat overshadowed by the pressure of living up to the Next Generation at the time, but hindsight allows Captain Janeway and her crew to be assessed on their own merits, of which there are many. Janeway herself stands shoulder to shoulder with Kirk and Picard. The Delta Quadrant concept still feels bravely ambitious 3 decades later, and rewatching Voyager's 7 seasons provides a consistently enjoyable experience. Voyager's positive legacy is visible in how much joy more recent character returns have brought. Kate Mulgrew and Robert Beltran's roles were a big reason behind the popularity of Star Trek. Prodigy, 7 of 9 central role in Star Trek. Picard led to calls for her own spin-off as captain of the Enterprise G, and Robert Picardo's return is one of the most exciting things about Star Trek's upcoming Starfleet Academy series. Voyager and its crew need a Star Trek comeback like Picard Season 3's USS Enterprise D. The best way to honor Star Trek, Voyager's crucial place in franchise history would be with a scene similar to what the Enterprise D's crew received in Star Trek, Picard's series finale, The Last Generation, where Voyager's cast reunited alongside their ship for one last hurrah. Granted, the concept isn't particularly original at this point, with both Kirk and Picard leading their crews on similar jaunts previously, but Voyager might be the last Star Trek series actually able to pull off such an epic explosion of nostalgia. The USS Voyager getting its figurative flowers would complete the set. Being set on a space station makes Deep Space Nine immediately unsuited for a scene in the vein of the Enterprise D's swan song. The overall darker tone of Sisko's show also feels out of sync with a feel-good, getting the band back together celebration, and Sisko actor Avery Brooks continues to show no interest in returning to Star Trek. Meanwhile, Star Trek Enterprise lacks the status and reputation to warrant a high-profile reunion, although that may change after a couple more decades fly by. When Star Trek Picard premiered in 2020, it did more than just bring back a legendary captain. It proved that there's still a deep emotional well to draw from when revisiting beloved Star Trek crews. With thoughtful storytelling, modern production, and respectful nods to continuity, Picard reignited interest in the Next Generation while providing closure and evolution for its characters. And now it's time for Star Trek Voyager to receive the same treatment. Voyager was a different kind of Star Trek from the outset. It was bold, diverse, and willing to take narrative risks. It gave us the first female captain as the lead, the enigmatic and sharp Captain Catherine Janeway, a character who, like Picard, inspired a generation of fans. Yet, since Voyager's return to Earth in its series finale back in 2001, the crew has been largely absent from the Star Trek universe. Aside from Janeway's holographic cameo in Star Trek, Prodigy, fans have been left to speculate about the post-Delta Quadrant futures of Seven of Nine, Tuvok, the Doctor, and the rest of the crew. The resurgence of Star Trek over the last few years has shown us that audiences are hungry for more than just new frontiers. They want meaningful reconnections with the past. Picard succeeded not just because of nostalgia, but because it gave us a chance to see how time changes heroes. Seven of Nine, arguably Voyager's breakout character, was one of the emotional anchors of Picard, and Jerry Ryan's performance reminded everyone just how complex and compelling that character truly is. But imagine what could be done with an entire series centered on the Voyager crew, many of whom remain unexplored in modern canon. A Voyager comeback could give us a continuation, not just of personal arcs, but of broader themes the show wrestled with: survival, identity, homecoming, and integration. How did B'Elanna Torres adjust to life in the Alpha Quadrant? Did the Doctor fight for holographic rights as hinted at in the finale? What's become of Chakotay, especially after Prodigy teased his mysterious disappearance? And Janeway, what does it mean to be a woman who spent 7 years alone in the stars, only to return to a Federation that might not understand the choices she had to make? A revival doesn't need to be a carbon copy of Picard either. Voyager's story was different, more isolated, and focused on a tight-knit crew far from the comforts of home. That dynamic could lend itself to a more intimate, character-driven series. Perhaps it's not a galaxy-spanning threat, but a personal mission that reunites the crew, a moral dilemma, a Federation conspiracy, or an alien message from the Delta Quadrant that only Voyager's veterans can decipher. Beyond the narrative possibilities, a Voyager comeback is important for representation. Janeway remains a cultural icon, especially for women in STEM and leadership roles. Bringing her back in a central role, especially after Prodigy reintroduced her to a younger generation, could resonate powerfully in today's media landscape. The same goes for characters like Tuvok, a black Vulcan whose calm wisdom was always a stabilizing force, or B'Elanna Torres, a biracial woman grappling with identity long before it was a widespread conversation. It's also worth noting the current technological leap in TV production. The budget and effects we saw in Picard or Strange New Worlds could bring Voyager's world to life in ways the original series couldn't. Imagine a cinematic take on the Delta Quadrant, or flashbacks to Voyager's time in hostile space, framed against their new lives in the Federation. There's so much potential, both visually and emotionally. The time is right. The fandom is ready. The cast, many of whom have expressed interest in returning, are still active and beloved. Picard proved that the right mix of respect, creativity, and innovation can make a comeback not only viable but triumphant. So here's the pitch, not just for nostalgia's sake, but because Voyager deserves its own legacy epilogue. Let us see how those years in isolation shaped our favorite crew. Let us reconnect with the ship that never gave up. Let us find out what it truly means to come home and what you do after you get there. It's time for Star Trek, Voyager to boldly return. Want a version tailored for a blog, social media thread, or podcast script? I can tweak the tone or format. So here's the pitch, not just for nostalgia's sake, but because Voyager deserves its own legacy epilogue. Let us see how those years in isolation shaped our favorite crew. Let us reconnect with the ship that never gave up. Let us find out what it truly means to come home and what you do after you get there.